Rise of the Robots is a fighting game that is famous for having amazing visuals for the time, but having amazingly bad gameplay. But is that really fair? Yes, the game looked great for the time, and to be honest, I'm still fairly impressed with the graphics. But is the game actually that bad? Or was it just a weaker fighting game than the likes of Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter in a time when they dominated the scene? Let's find out as I deep dive into Rise of the Robots. In today's video, I'm going to be playing the Amiga 1200 version of Rise of the Robots. Now, I'll be specific about that, as after first playing this version for the video, I had to go back and check other versions to see if what I experienced in this version was true of every version of the game, or if just some design choices on this Amiga version made it particularly bad. Recently on the channel, I've been playing a lot of Street Fighter games. In particular, I've been playing the weird versions of Street Fighter 2. Now look, I enjoy Street Fighter, but I felt I needed something of a palate cleanser just so I could go back to the next Street Fighter game with the proper level of appreciation. Something that would give me perspective on whether the weird Street Fighters are actually bad. And what better way to test to see if they're bad than by putting what many call one of the worst fighting games of all time through the paces. Look, by the same token, having played so many unusual and some frankly bad Street Fighter games, maybe Rise of the Robots will come across like $1,000,000. The game sees you play as a big blue cyborg. I haven't gone into all of the lore of the games, but I am aware that when you lose a fight, you can see that there is literally a human inside the big blue armor that you're playing in this playable cyborg. So the character, Cyborg, is also known as Echo 35-2. I know, a real catchy name, right? And Echo 35-2, look, maybe you don't need to say the dash, maybe it's Mark II like with Iron Man, but I'm going to say the dash for now. Echo 35-2 is the only character you can play in single player mode. Think about that a second. When Street Fighter 1 first released, you could only play as Ryu, or as I would say, Ryu. But enough about that for now. Unless you use the crafty method, which I've recently spoken about on my Human Killing Machines video, which would allow you to also play as Ken in the single player game. It was a palette swap character, and then you'd have the second player basically having a different character with a different name, based on the one-player character of Ryu. Rise of the Robots will let player 2 play as one of the other robots, but only in two-player mode. There isn't a way to play through the story mode as any other character than Cyborg/Echo 35-2. Cyborg looks like a cross between RoboCop and the Blue Power Ranger, and he's not a badly designed character. But for my money, I've never really been into the fully suited, can't see their mouth or eyes look of Iron Man and Optimus Prime and other such robotic-like characters. This is okay though, but then Cyborg isn't a unique character in Rise of the Robots because literally all of the characters are robots. I mean, sure, there's Transformers and people don't complain that they're all too samey, even though that they should, because they are all too samey, but the fact is that all of the characters are robots, and this means that none of them feel unique or special. Having ones that are the size of giant robot gorillas is cool, and the Supervisor character, which is the final boss, is a T-1000-like final boss, which is something a little bit different, I suppose. I still feel that something like Killer Instinct, where it had full gore, that character stands out because he's the only cyborg robot thing. In terms of other fighters in the game, the first one you go against reminds me of the mech suit thing that Ripley wears in Aliens. Then there's the Blue Gorilla, which is the coolest looking one in my opinion. But in my experience, that character is just a snivelling coward who just ducks for cover at every opportunity. There's also a big red dude who in the cutscene before the fight literally flies at you like Iron Man. And then, in the actual gameplay, doesn't fly at all. I know. It's a sign of bad things to come. In the case of the red dude, I was aware that his size was a disadvantage for him, as you could easily hit multiple flying kicks on him even when he tries to dodge you. I've taken a look at a few versions of Rise of the Robots, and whilst some of the versions have scrolling backgrounds, the Amiga one, at least, just has you fight in a fixed area of the screen that you start the fight in. Everything looks good, and the game really does deserve credit in its innovative use of CGI renders for characters at a time when not much else outside of Rareware's Donkey Kong Country and Killer Instinct was doing it. But whilst the graphics were good, once again, it's all robots and the locations look like the places where robots would live. It's all like factories and places that look a bit samey. There are even blocks that look like portaloos. Whereas Street Fighter has locations inspired by countries all over the world and Mortal Kombat has caves and dungeons, yeah, this just is metal and more metal. The graphics are impressive, but they are also ultimately forgettable. There was a lot of hype going into this game's release. The main one was for the graphics, and whilst they are cool looking, they are also bland. The other area of hype was the music. Yes, the music was hyped because it features a soundtrack created by Brian May from Queen, as in Freddie Mercury. But ultimately, he only contributed very little to the game due to delays. But that didn't stop them advertising his involvement as a major selling point. And then there was the advanced AI, which would control the opponent robots. The AI was meant to behave in weird and unexpected ways to throw you off, and also be smart enough to learn your attack style to counter it. As it turns out, you can defeat the entire game with a repeated jump kick. As I've said with a few fighting games I've looked at on the channel, I attempt not just to do that in the interest of showing more interesting footage. If you just jump kick all the time, it looks a bit bland on the video. But yeah, pretty much just kick your way to victory. Jump kick right to the head, and that will take you from the first round all the way through to the final boss with no problems. The game does have a power meter that charges up, and the longer you hold the fire button, the harder your attack will be. Combine this with a direction and you'll pull off stronger attacks. Little taps will deal less damage, and bigger ones will deal bigger damage. Sometimes you'll find an opponent that can really knock a lot of your energy off if they manage to land a blow, but frankly, this is rare. The Amiga version also has no music, which is a shame when you consider that they did manage to include all of the short but impressive CGI cutscenes. But I guess it was a case of one or the other, and they chose to have the CGI cutscenes. It's weird then that the music of Brian May was being included as such a hype point when this version of the game literally doesn't have any music as you fight. Now, the worst part of the Amiga version is that you cannot seemingly jump over your opponent and fight facing the opposite direction to where you start. To me, this is just crazy in a fighting game. I had to test to see if you could face the other way in the Super Nintendo version, and indeed, you can. I just don't get why they wouldn't make this possible. Maybe some of the enemy fighters aren't quite symmetrical just to flip the artwork, but who knows, even if it's that the characters aren't symmetrical, just still flip the artwork and let it so that you can face the other way. The game only lets you play as one character, like I mentioned earlier, and the game also makes you start the game from scratch if you lose any fight. Honestly, the parallels I've got to this that compare to Human Killing Machine, which I just looked at on the channel, which was truly terrible, are frightening. You go through all of the same fighters twice in this, and then at the end of the run, you face the Terminator chick. Now, I've never quite got what the fascination was in the mid-1990s with hot robot women, as we also got this and Jarell as the final boss in Virtua Fighter in consecutive years, both as the final boss. So I also tested the Amiga CD32 version of the game, and that seemingly is just the same as the Amiga 1200 version. Weirdly, in trying to get it to run, I experienced the CD-based game actually ran really fast, and I'm not gonna lie, it made the game a lot more fun. If the game had the option for turbo speed, that would have been something to at least keep a bit more interest in it. As it is, Rise of the Robots hasn't changed my opinion in this instance to convince me it's not as bad as people say. The graphics are good, but the location and character designs leave something to be desired. There are still more versions out there for me to test, and I'll try to check out some more of them on the channel in the future. Now, did you play Rise of the Robots back in the day? Is there a version which is better than the poor Amiga game that I played here today? And does the game deserve its poor reputation? Let me know in the comments. So that is going to wrap things up here on the channel for this video today. This was Rise of the Robots. Hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't done so already, I would appreciate if you would smash that subscribe button here on the Geek Battle Gaming YouTube channel. Do check out all of the other videos, and as always, you can check out the written article version of today's discussion over at www.xstreamed.tv/gaming. And with that, until next time, stay safe, always stay extremed, and ciao for now. Boom, and we're off the air.